I was looking through all my older videos and I was absolutely horrified to find out that I never did this video. So let's pit these two broadcast legends against each other to see which one comes out on top. But I do have to make something perfectly clear first, though. When looking into this video, I saw a ton of articles and videos comparing them, looking for the best dynamic mic. Now, I hate to be that guy, but neither of these are going to come close to that moniker. But before you get angry, this isn't the video for that argument. However, in the realm of broadcast microphones, both of these mics have a claim to that throne. And I think the most interesting thing there is that both of these microphones took very different approaches to becoming the standards that they are within the broadcasting field today. So, well, let's start there. Now, in this corner, you have the SM7B, which shockingly kind of started out as a boom mic. Now, its grandfather, the SM5, was developed in the 60s and was intended as a broadcast mic. And it was very much a fantastic microphone, though it didn't quite make the waves that Shure had hoped for, as it was kind of expensive, bulky, and heavy. With little interest in waning sales, though, the microphone kind of faded into the background and was quietly discontinued. Again, though, I do have to point out, it was a very good microphone. So, Shure engineers went to work in the 60s to fill out that SM or studio microphone lineup. Now, of course, the SM57 and 58 were born here in the 60s. But it took a few years to expand from studio and live music to that dynamic broadcast mic that was all the rage at the time. And in 1973, the SM7 was introduced. Again, though, to little or no fanfare. And that statement might not be fair, but compared to its iconic status of today, you'd be accurate to say the launch was a bit disappointing. Okay, I mean, it made some sales, it was pretty steady, so I guess it had that going for it. But then, a producer by the name of Bruce Swedien got a hold of it, and well, he made literal magic with it. Now, the legend says that he tested out several mics on Michael Jackson's voice, and the SM7 was the one he liked the best. Though he did also say that he loved the microphones and had several, so maybe separating the legend and reality here might be kind of tough. Had he used it before on other artists? Who knows? Well, clearly no artist bigger than MJ at the time. And honestly, that's where this microphone kind of started gaining real traction. Problem was, though, at the time, it was only recording studios buying this type of gear. It wasn't like nowadays where these things were household names. Live acts generally stuck with their handhelds, and broadcast was already riding another horse, so the market was kind of specific. But all that changed in the 2000s. The SM7 turned into the SM7A. Then it was re-released as the SM7B with very minor upgrades. Then podcasting started to really take off. And well, at the time, broadcast mics were being sought out by those that were adventurous enough to start one. And it's kind of an interesting thought there. Price-wise, this is one of the cheaper broadcast mics available even today, if not the cheapest, especially back in the 2000s. And while a lot of broadcasting gear had a bit of a luxury tax built in, the SM7B tended to trend a bit lower in cost, meaning when these podcasts were starting out, this actually looked like a pretty obvious choice. Perhaps there's some alternate reality where the RA20 was adopted as it had a lower price, but I don't know, who knows? Well, you know the rest to the story. Joe Rogan basically created a whole search section on Google of people asking, what mic is he using? And with that, the SM7B got its rightful place in the history books as one of the most influential mics of all time. So as for the Electro Voice RA20, this story is much less fanciful, as this was basically just a fantastic microphone from day one. Now, the RA20 here was born out of a search for the perfect microphone that could solve one of the more annoying issues in all of audio, proximity effect. Basically, the closer you get to a microphone, the boomier your voice gets. And what Electro Voice came up with was something called the variable D technology, or variable distance. This was something they began rolling out on all of their mics to varying degrees of success. And the first one to really catch on was the Buchanan Hammer, otherwise known as the EV664. This thing was a massive hit for musicians, and specifically with singers that had big old boomy voices. However, it was also a fantastic instrument mic as it was used for all types of things from saxophones all the way down to kick drums. But of course, there were other microphones that Electro Voice was testing the market with, including the RE15 and RE16. But again, they're not really broadcast, though they did become quite popular among musicians. Then the RE20 dropped, intended for broadcast, but also as an all-around microphone. In fact, this mic was actually used in several studio albums. Probably the most famous use would be by Stevie Wonder. Next time you hear Superstition, it was recorded on an RE20. That's pretty cool. But the real movement happened when broadcasters got a hold of it. Now remember, at the time, radio stations were still looking at moving fully away from ribbon microphones, especially as this new technology called FM radio was really taking off. And with the clarity that you could get from a dynamic compared to a ribbon, this was just the microphone to usher in that new age, or really golden age of radio. And this thing had a lot going for it. It sounded fantastic on almost everyone. And it was easy to EQ and compress for those boomy voices in the heyday of radio. And speaking of those boomy voices, well, this thing allowed for a more intimate and personal relationship with the audience, like you're whispering in their ear. You could get close to it, and I mean really close. And without all the mud from proximity, it was an easy decision, basically allowing any idiot to use it and sound good. But even better, it was built like a tank. And for radio stations back in the day, considering who was using these things, perhaps not a bad idea. And honestly, from the 70s on, this was the go-to. You will still find a lot of stations rocking these today. How's that for staying power? So as we discussed, the RE20 had the variable detect, but interestingly enough, the SM7B actually limits the proximity effect, but in more of a basic way. Literally, the way it is built is meant to keep you away from the capsule. So as long as you're using this in the way it was intended, you're actually quite fine. The SM7B, on the other hand, is very much a flat microphone that just takes EQ and compression like a champ. Honestly, so does the RE20, but there is way more of a built-in sparkle on that RE20. And realistically, it really isn't a built-in sparkle per se, but more the fact that the response past 10K isn't rolled off like on the SM7B. Both mics, however, do take EQ and compression really, really well. Years of being the go-to on the radio is proof positive of that for the RE20, and honestly, a well-tuned SM7B just sounds amazing. The aesthetics, though, seem to go to the SM7B, and for a lot of people. And it's not just because of aesthetics being pleasing, but size is a bit of an issue. The RE20, when set up with the shock mount, this thing can be a logistical nightmare in a studio, while the SM7B is quite a bit more compact with the built-in shock mount mechanism that Shure is known for. And finally, when you're talking about performance, I do find that the SM7B handles plosives better than the RE20. Obviously, having the built-in mic sock does work, but that RE20 begs for a bit of a better mic technique, though if you know what you are doing, you should be fine with either. So are they still on top? Yeah, the RE20 has been getting shoved in its locker a bit by some recent up-and-comers. You got the BCM 705 from Neumann, and even the condenser version, the BCM 104, has been slowly taking over as the main go-to for actual broadcast situations. But don't kid yourself. These things are still very much relevant. If you can score one used like from a radio station that's upgrading, these things will literally still be here after a nuclear war along with the cockroaches. As for the SM7B, while it has been enjoying its own golden age of podcasting, even it has seen some really tough competition start to leak in. And that's mainly due to cheaper options, especially as people start to realize that this is more of a status symbol than it is for a marker of actual talent. But That challenge also came around the same time that the Rodecaster started introducing people to DSP effects, making all of the microphones sound like broadcast mics. But where the RE20 does seem to be galloping into the sunset, this SM7B doesn't seem to be slowing down much at all. So then, which one of these broadcast legends is better? Now, this is going to be very much a personal choice on your part, but for me, the SM7B is my go-to way more than the RE20. But interestingly enough, it's not just because of the sound. For me, it's about the footprint and the size of the mic as well. I remember having to move this microphone around just to see my co-host on the radio, then they would move, so I'd have to move the bloody mic again. But there is a big caveat here. I do feel like the RE20 is easier to EQ than the SM7B, so if that's one of your weak points, this might be worth considering. But if you are rocking an SM7B and you're looking for a bit of a lift, you should check out my video on this, the Angry Audio Smooth. Basically, it's a set it and forget it solution to make your voice sound like it was dipped in honey. Those are their words, not mine. You can check out that video up here if you're interested. So cheers, guys, and thanks for watching.